Greetings, everyone. It's Trey here on this 22nd day of June 2018, and I'm here with a former distant interlocutor partner who I've wanted to engage for a long time and have been unable to until just now. So this is CF here, and we are going to talk about intentionality as it relates to the material world. So welcome, CF.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hold on just a minute. Let me turn my volume down just a little bit here. Okay, so I can't access, hold on just a minute, let me look here. I can't access that thread because David has now blocked me and I can't see that thread anymore, but
I can see it.
Okay, hold on just a minute.
David, by David, I think you're referring to GABA guy.
Yes, he is known as GABA guy in G+. And we've been friends for a long time, but he finally blocked me. And it was in our interaction with this. Okay, so anyway, I got the quote here, and it says here, one possibility is consciousness is a basic property of matter like mass and size. It's only when you get bigger and more complex structures where they become sentient, self-reflecting, intentional, etc. This is called a property dualism, and it's compatible with atheism. Now, you're not an atheist.
No.
And I was arguing with David, though, and you said this is a possibility. And so I asked you to put on your atheist hat and argue for this particular perspective because you said it is a viable form of explaining reality. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, although right now I'm looking around the room mostly searching for my atheist hat. I must have misplaced it for... But yeah, I at least think it solves the issue of how consciousness and intentionality can be explained on an atheist view. I think it falls short in other areas. Like I think with panpsychism, which is, the property dualistic view I was espousing, you kind of run into problems where you might be where you might fall into epiphenomenalism, which is essentially the notion that intentionality or mental states don't actually affect material states. So I'm thinking right now, I want to put my arm up and look, it just comes up. It's kind of interesting. But for the epiphenomenalist, they'd say, oh no, your body is just doing the arm moving and your mind and intentionality is just thinking it's playing some kind of causal role when it's not. And my response to that is, well, I think the atheist is committed to some kind of determinism anyway, so it's not generally going to be a big deal. And I think atheism would fall qua a lack of libertarian free will, not necessarily a lack of an inability to explain consciousness. So I'd say even this falls short, but it only falls short not because of consciousness, but only because of the free will thing.
Okay. Yes, but it's got to have an ontological basis. What exactly is it within matter? Because you've got this diversity of matter, and the matter has within it this this quality of valuing. Okay, and so on this view, is there ever a time when there was such a thing as non-value on this view?
What do you mean non-value? Are you saying, is there such a time when this matter doesn't experience value, but then it does go to experience value?
Yes, because you said that when they assemble in a certain sort of way, it manifests itself. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah. So I believe you invoked the principle of proportional causality, which essentially states that there cannot exist something in the effect that did not exist with... Sorry, there cannot exist something within the effect that did not precede it in its causes. And what I was trying to do was explain it qua its material, by way of its material cause. So why is it that you have mass on your body? It's because that mass pre-exists in the material cause, of which are consist of all your subatomic particles that make you up, and eventually you get the sum total mass you have then. Likewise, there's just going to be a point in time where what exists in the material cause of your subatomic particles or whatever, which is like the small bits of consciousness, just accumulate, and you get more complex forms of it, including the ability to value, the ability to have intentionality, the ability to self-reflect, etc. So this is kind of what emerges from that.
Okay, so rocks are actually intentional, but they just don't have enough of those particles that will enable it to manifest itself so that we can see them contemplating about existence.
Yeah. So when it comes to things like inanimate objects like rocks, you don't see any. They're conscious in some way, but I wouldn't even say it's even to the point where they're intentional. I'd say it's to a point where they just have it. They just don't have any complex structure to express it in any meaningful way. Like even a plant is more conscious than a rock on this account. It's just based on the structure itself. And while the theory isn't, and while I can't really flesh out the theory as well as maybe a panpsychist themselves can or a property dualist can, there are what they want to do is establish this as kind of like a science where we could see what kind of influence this might have in our experimental physics, which might actually be an interesting position to take or area to go into. It might be falsified. Who knows?
Okay, so you've got this property, and you would agree that all matter is composite, right?
All matter is composite. Are you asking if I view that? Are you asking if I take the view that all matter is divisible in essence, like the Cartesian view?
Yes. Are they made up of atoms to give them their structure as to what they are?
Well, I mean, even I think those atoms. So I think there's going to be a point in time where you just get to your most basic fundamental material, and at one point it was atoms, but now we're getting to subatomical particles, and now we're at quarks, and who knows whatever basic entity might emerge in our future sciences. But I'd say matter just consists of our most basic fundamental entity.
But it's plurality, right? It's composed.
Are you speaking of matter, like the sum total of matter is composed? Or are you saying?
Well, are you saying that all matter ultimately is one?
No, what I'm saying is matter is going to go down to some kind of simplest entity.
Okay. And is that entity sentient?
Is it sentient? Not in the way, well, not in the way me and you are sentient, but it has like the most basic amount of sentience, and like it would also have the most basic amount of mass or size or width or whatever that might be.
So on this view, then, a person who would hold this view is a pantheist, right?
Yes. No, wait, actually, not necessarily. I'm not sure how they would translate that into their theology. Maybe some are pantheists, but I'm not sure.
Well, matter would need to be eternal, right?
No, yeah. But I'm not sure if this would qualify because theism, at least in its most classical sense, is not requires an entity which is unmoved, which doesn't change, but everything around it changes because of its how amazing it is. It's perfectitude.
No, there's an ontological distinction between, you've got two different types of ontology. And that's this is my problem with this view. If you're going to say that all existence is matter and that matter is eternal, then you've got the one in a many problem. Anything that's composite needs a composer, okay? And anything that's composed is not what it is until it is composed. So you can't have an eternal regress of effects or a contingency or contingent being that makes up all of reality. It doesn't make any sense.
Did you read by any chance Edward Fazer's book, 5 Arguments for Theism?
Yes. Well, most of it.
I'm sorry?
I read most of it, I think.
Right, because I'm not sure if you're invoking contingency, compositeness, or if you're invoking, the physical argument, because they all seem to be used interchangeably in what you said. So
my argument doesn't come from Facer, though.
No, I know, but I'm not sure exactly which way you're phrasing the one many argument.
I'm speaking both metaphysically and physically. I mean, either one. It doesn't matter. That's why, you know, when our
Oh,
confession in Thomistic, even theology says, that, you know, God is without parts. It's not talking about body parts. It's talking about metaphysical parts.
right.
And
His
anything that's
essence is, yeah, you're right. His essence is his existence, and he is the pure act of existence itself. As Thomas likes to say, and any part of which we like to speak about him, be it his goodness or his power, really those two things are identical in him. But the reason why we can speak of it meaningfully is because of analogy.
That's right. Without analogical language, we have no connection with pure being, since we are potential beings who are not eternal.
Unless you take the Duns Scotus line of reasoning, but I won't get into that. But in any case, just going off of this, you invoked earlier, anything which is composed needs a composer.
Right.
And that's a point the Neoplatonists made. Anything which and they took it to a far more extreme variety than Thomas did, because they didn't even think the one had any goodness within it. And they
transcends everything.
I'm sorry?
The one transcends everything, all of that. It's
the
unknowable.
goodness. Yeah, and even the intellect itself is on a lower level, and that's anathema to the later Christian classical theism that merged with Aristotle.
Right.
Right. And you're not really invoking the argument from composition, or are you? Because that's kind of.
Well, I'm saying anything that's contingent requires a composer. It has at very minimum, every contingent being has existence and essence. Those two parts, at least. In other words, you have, like, I have substantial form of a human. I'm a human, an instantiation of that. But I also was given my existence of my humanity. One is my whatness, and the other one was my whetherness. You know, whether I am and what I am. So everything that is contingent and everything is a composite, and you cannot have composition without a composer.
All right.
So that's the problem with this view.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if this is a problem for this view per se. Like if the argument is sound, it's not really a matter of pantheism or materialism. Even idealism would fall under this understanding, because you require a one, and you require entities which, for any entity which changes, you require a one perfect indivisible entity, which is God. And so this isn't really a matter of trying to explain consciousness. It's more of a matter of trying to explain reality itself.
Well, no, you're making an argument for consciousness, but it touches upon ontological necessity, which we can't just you know, pigeonhole our view here and say, oh, I like this, even though it doesn't work for a unified. You know, we're all seeking to find a unified whole. What do they call it? An M theory, really, for existence. And so when somebody comes up with some novel little idea and it has these problems that affect in the metaphysical or in the big picture view, it's like, okay, why would you hold that when it doesn't work? You know, we're trying to seek an overarching, and I think Christianity is the only view that can speak of the one and the many through a triune God, and that's the greatest question. I mean, Thales came up with that for 585 BC. It's like, how do we come up with the one and the many? You know, we got all this proof that how they come together. Only Christianity comes forth with a view that can deal with these issues in a satisfying way. No other we can.
What about water, though?
Thales' water?
Yeah, sorry.
It's hylozoistic, but not really, but it appeared to be. But anyway.
No, yeah, I would agree with you. Every view that we have has to fit within the whole. And there are views which are fairly inessential and views that aren't. So, for example, I agree we need an overarching Christian worldview to explain things. I'm all on board with you there. Where we might depart might be here and there. Maybe the classical theism we need is more in line with Duns Scotus and less with Thomas, or more in line with some other classical medieval.
Duns Scotus didn't deny simplicity, though.
Oh, I know he didn't. He denied, I think he was mostly skeptical of the need for analogical language. I think he thought unification, or speaking of God univocally, doesn't undermine that. But
yeah, but it does. I mean, Thomas. You're a big Thomas guy, and you don't realize the glory of that man.
Well,
You cannot use univocal language to talk about that which does not predicate, because our language itself is predicational.
Well,
he's got to use accommodated language because it's incommunicable.
I really want to continue on with this conversation much more than the consciousness one, but that's the one we started off with.
That's fine.
I'm good with going in whatever direction you want.
Okay. Well, it may be that we agree that there's a problem with matter is inherently conscious, because it cannot deal with the idea of the one and many and the need for composition. You can't compose yourself before you are.
Right. So I agree with you. It's not sufficient, but what I'm saying is it's necessary.
It doesn't work.
Right. So
that's my point.
Wait, hold on. I agree with you. It's not sufficient, but what I'm saying is it would be necessary to posit for an atheist if he wants to explain at least as far as consciousness goes. However, I think as people who prefer to go from reality to explain consciousness rather than go from consciousness to explain reality, we would do much more to just start from reality and then explain consciousness thereafter.
Well, it doesn't matter which way you go. It's just you've got to come up with a comprehensive perspective. I don't mind via causalitatis as long as it's going to lead us in a direction that makes sense. I don't care where you start, really. Of course, you got to start with yourself.
Well, actually, that's more of a Cartesian understanding of it, from what I understand. Whereas Thomas and Aristotle start more from reality, and then they use that to explain the self.
Yes, but epistemologically, up to Descartes, the emphasis was always on metaphysics. And then once from Descartes forward, it became an emphasis on epistemology. And then Kant came along and basically destroyed metaphysics. He didn't destroy it, but the idiots bowed down to him. And then everything just was all about epistemology. So when you're talking today, everybody's fascinated with epistemology. That's all that matters. And this is why we're in this malaise of stupidity in philosophy today. And these idiots that I argue with in the internet don't know anything before Kant, and it's rather frustrating. And I'm not an educated guy at all. I'm self-taught and all that stuff. But the arguments that I had to go through is just like right now I'm arguing with Bert and with Fox, and it's like neither one of them has any. And Bert usually is really sharp, but man, he is off his game today. It's just he looks really stupid today. Sorry, Bert.
So I haven't been following your arguments with either Fox in the Know or Bert, and I'm not going to comment on how the argument there is going, but I can sympathize with Kant with a lot of the modern distaste for metaphysicians in light of a Hume quote of all things. I believe he said something along the lines of, "Look, when it comes to things concerning divinity and metaphysics, there is a whole library filled with metaphysicians who just seem to be arguing back and forth with one another, and doesn't seem to be any there's nothing to signify any progress going on there. Right. We're still kind of arguing about this sort of thing that we've inherited from the Greeks, and that's that. Whereas at least if you look at all these empirical advances that have been coming through Europe, at least the sciences there, they seem to be, they at least seem to be giving us some indication of progress because we're better capable of manipulating the world around us. And this is an argument that goes a little actually before the rationalists, and you could find good chunks of it in Roger Bacon, who was a 14th century thinker.
Okay, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. So I think that, I'm not saying that is a justifiable argument, but I am saying that's an understandable reason why people aren't motivated to continue on with the metaphysics project.
Yeah, but why? What progress toward what?
Progress towards what?
You said that the scientific method has given us progress.
Progress toward, as I said, progress towards manipulating, using, understanding, and comprehending the natural world around us.
For what?
For example, curing diseases, going to space.
But what is the ultimate goal? I mean, are we just chasing our tails? What's the purpose?
Oh, I don't know. We seem to think that well, we seem to think that stuff is cool. Like that's
That's
about
right.
it.
We're really stupid. In other words, we can't answer the big questions of who am I, why am I here, why am I going, what is the formal principle for existence for humanity? And we have devolved into a point where right now the entire Western world is descending into non-existence because all they think about is how they can find their next barrier, their next sensual pleasure, rather than having duty or purpose. And we are watching the entire Western world go extinct before our eyes. There's not one single culture that is developed that does not have a negative fertility rate and is aging. We're
Japan.
killing ourselves because of the stupidity of empiricism apart from metaphysics. And now we're just recapturing, as Protestant sides, especially the Reformed tradition, we are just recapturing metaphysics in a major sort of way. And you guys as Catholics, we're looking to you to learn on these things because in many ways, Rome has, especially in Vatican II, has devolved significantly, but officially, her metaphysic and her thinking about theology proper is delicious and delightful, and so it's still there. It's a continuation of it, even though a lot of it has died. But in Protestantism, the last 200 years, we completely jettisoned, because of Kant, basically, we jettisoned thinking about theology proper, and we are guys like William Lane Craig is so pathetically. What do you think of William Lane Craig?
How do I
Are you familiar with this theology proper?
Oh, yeah. I think he's very rash in dejecting divine simplicity, classical theism. I think that he sometimes is willing to compromise for the sake of evangelism, which I don't particularly care for too much in certain respects. What else?
I think he's a heretic. He's a partialist.
Oh, and his Neapolitanism, that's
Neapolitanism,
that.
He's horrible.
Yeah,
and it's guys like him that are leading our camp, and I think that is presuppositionalism is rooted in a sloppy theology proper. All the guys in our camp that are really bad on their theology proper are also presuppositionalists. I'm not talking about the guy in the street. I'm talking about the big thinkers and stuff.
Right. Although I'd say Sproul, R.C. Sproul, while he lived, wasn't too bad. He actually did try to approach the classical.
He was excellent. That's who I am. I'm a disciple and acolyte of, know that, of Sproul. About everything I know I got from Sproul, really, at the base level. He was a staunch classicist, but nobody would listen to him. Now it's coming on with a vengeance. People are finally rediscovering this, and literally it's almost like an avalanche in our circles, and it's very exciting. There's a lot of controversy, but it's a wonderful thing. Uh-oh, did we lock up? Either you or me are locked up. Let's see. I don't think it's me because I got really fast internet now. If you can hear me, CF, why don't you hit F5 and go out and come back in. I'll go ahead and do it too.
Hello?
Okay. Maybe that was me then. I had to get out and come in.
No, what happened was my computer shut off because it unplugged and I didn't know it was low on battery. My bad.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Fortunately, I have my second laptop up, so it's all good.
Oh, good. Okay. Good.
All right. In any case, okay. You know what? I have sympathy. This is why I actually like guys like R.C. Sproul. As I was saying, you said you were a R.C. Sproul kind of guy, and you know what? You are right to like the man. There is a lot to envy.
Well, I considered him the greatest thinker alive for his day. I know you would sharply disagree with that, but he was a very intelligent man, and he was very thoughtful and he tried to make an advocate. He tried to be an advocate of rational Christianity, not rationalism, but a rational Christianity, which is kind of anathema in our day today. There's a lot of fideism that rules the day, and he loved Thomas. He considered Thomas to be at least the greatest theologian of the second millennium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is and you know what? I will say this: that is a pretty fair opinion. Thomas is amazing. He unified and even in his day, he unified so many disciplines. He unified Aristotelian science with an Augustinian mentality to theology, and he even had a very strong theology of predestination that would make some people in the Reformed camp blush.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And he had his weaknesses too, from my perspective, but he was a wonderful benefit to the church. I don't think one of the greatest intellects, I think, maybe in mankind. I was listening to someone giving a biography on the other day, and he said he could dictate to 5 people on 5 subjects all at the same time. Just put them in a circle, and he would give them a sentence, go to the next guy, go to the next guy, and just keep going.
Was it Peter Kreeft?
No, it was, I don't know where the guy got it from. It's a history on the net. It's a history thing I listened to. And he was just talking about people that were able to super productive people. And one of the guys he talked about was Thomas.
Well, so. Yeah, I believe Kreeft actually said Plato dictated, at least from the works that we know, 500,000 words of writing. Aristotle, 1 million. Thomas, I believe it was either 5 or 8 million.
Wow. I've got Kreeft's Summa the Summa. I like it. It's good. It's a short version of the Summa.
You should just come over to the Catholic side. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing is, here's 3 things we got to have. We got to have a proper knowledge of God.
Right.
You got to have a proper anthropology of who man is, and then you've got to have a proper understanding of how we relate to God.
Right.
And you guys have proper theology, and your anthropology is weak, and you totally lost it on salvation. Your soteriology is lost. You're lost. I mean, there's no problem. Almost all Roman Catholic, if someone holds at Trent, Rome had the gospel until she anathematized it at Trent. That was the end of it there.
Right. So I'm not going to go into soteriology because that's another thing.
Fine. I'm just going to say that in passing. Don't expect me to come to. I am utterly convinced of the Protestant perspective on soteriology.
Are you a Presbyterian or a Reformed Baptist?
Yeah, Reformed Baptist, 1689.
Oh, I see.
We have a confession, the Second London Baptist Confession of Faith. It was written in 1677, but Charles was killing people at the time, so they didn't ratify it until 1689, until William of Orange came in.
You are an oddity because most people in the Reformed camp who look to theology proper, at least that I'm aware of, tend to be Presbyterians, not Reformed Baptists.
Yes, but you know what? We're the ones that are actually, oddly, we're the ones rediscovering this. In 2015, there was a conference, Southern California Reformed Baptist Conference, and James Dolezal, in reading, actually, you probably know him, Thomas Wayne-Andy. Are you familiar with Wayne-Andy?
No, I'm not.
He teaches on simplicity, or I think it's on simplicity. He's Roman Catholic, and this guy, James Dolezal, he's just got his PhD about 5 or 6 years ago, and he was listening to a lecture at Westminster, which is a Presbyterian, seminary, and you don't know who, what is his name? Blanking right now. Anyway, he's a famous church historian in our circles. I really like him a lot. Carl Truman. You probably don't know who he is. Truman was lecturing to him when he was a young student, and he said, unfortunately, he goes, if you want to study theology proper, don't go to the Protestants. He said, go to Wayne-Andy, and I think the God who suffers or something. Or no, I mean the God who, I can't remember anyway. And also, are you familiar with Gilles Emery?
No.
He's on the Trinity. He's also like that. So we're studying these guys, and then and so Dolezal just came out with a book that has been very popular, a very pedestrian level book called All That Is in God. It came out actually last year, and it's just been rocking the world. It's basically, he took those lectures that he spoke at Southern California in 2015 and basically made a book. It's a little bit more refined, and so the Reformed Baptists are putting out a lot of books. I can't think of another one too. There's several books that have come out just in the last 4 or 5 years that we're rediscovering things that we lost, basically pre-Enlightenment in our circles, because the Reformed Baptists didn't come out of the Anabaptists. We came out of the Puritan movement, and so we have a very close affinity to Presbyterians and to Reformed folks, and so you see a lot of cross-pollination. We hang out with each other a lot, the Presbyterians and the Reformed Baptists, because our church polity is different, but our doctrine is very, very similar. So you're going to see a lot of us hanging out together. We really like each other a lot. So.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's fair enough. Well, I'm actually happy that the Southern Baptist Convention is rediscovering this.
No, not the Southern Baptist. I forgot. I should have made that stick. The Southern Baptist Convention is a mess.
Oh, I thought that's what. I thought that's.
I am worried about those guys are going off the cliff. I think right now.
Mea culpa.
It's your fault.
Oh no, it's my fault for misunderstanding you.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm with the Association of Reformed Baptist Churches in America. It's an association of churches. The way we run our churches is independent, so we're like not denominational. So we just have an association. It's called ARBGA, Association of Reformed Baptist Churches in America. So that's the association I hang out with. But Southern Baptist is there's some good stuff going on within them. There's a thing called founders within Southern Baptist, but the denomination itself is like, even the last several weeks, I'm like, oh man, they're really going off the deep end. I think it's unfortunate, but yeah. So yeah, I should have clarified that. People think of Baptist, you think of Southern Baptist because that's the biggest denomination of Baptist. So.
Right. Well, I actually seem to recall one Southern Baptist actually rediscovering a bit of Thomism and even some of Phaser's work. He actually appeared on a panel with William Lane Craig and what's his name?
Bishop Barron?
No, not Bishop Barron. So it was with William Lane Craig and Peter von Inwagen, and he was the third one in that. Here, I'll Google it.
I know who it is.
Peter von Inwagen, William Lane Craig, and oh yeah, it was on a discussion with regarding God and abstract objects. Mm-hmm. That was the one. And let's see, it consisted of William Lane Craig, Peter von Inwagen, and here it is, J.T. Bridges.
J.T. Bridges, that sounds familiar. There's some good guys. Is he a Southern Seminary or something?
Southern Evangelical Seminary.
Oh no, that's Norm Geisler. So that's they're very. When I say Southern Seminary, I meant Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. There's some good guys there, but that's their main seminary for the Southern Baptist. Southern Evangelical Seminary is Norm Geisler's seminary. They're very friendly to Thomist thinking, but they're also very sloppy with their evangelical soteriology. It's really kind of weird, but there's a lot of guys from SES that go to Rome that swim the Tiber from there. But they're very friendly to.
You know what? Once I actually contemplated being an Anglican before formally joining the Catholic Church.
I thought you already were Anglican. I thought you converted from Anglicanism to Rome.
No, yeah, I'm saying there was a time when I looked at Anglicanism before completely joining Rome.
And I thought you were though. You never were, or were you just nothing?
I was participating in an Anglican church for some time, but I realized I couldn't stay there mostly for the liberalism. The deacon of that church was himself a homosexual, and I'm like, yeah, and he didn't quite care for me speaking of my more conservative theological opinions, and I'm like, yeah, maybe this is a good sign I shouldn't stick to an Anglican communion. Although, the Anglican community is also a mess, but fortunately there's some good guys in the continuing Anglican movement.
Yeah, there is, and there's a few Episcopalians too that are still good, but it's a movement in decline, say that. Unfortunately, because there's a rich heritage there that is really nice, but they have the beauty in worship oftentimes. Somebody said one time it's the Presbyterians have the good theology, the Anglicans have the beautiful worship, and the Baptists have the moral living.
That's amazing. I actually love that.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought it was pretty appropriate.
Did you ever hear about the 3 great truths of religion?
Mm-hmm.
The 3 great truths of religion are this: the Jews don't accept Jesus as the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
The Protestants don't accept the Pope as the head of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And the Baptists don't recognize each other at the bar. Although I think that's mostly the certain Baptist. I'm not sure if you're alti-totalers. I know.
No, we're not. Actually, we're
Yeah.
not. But we're yeah. The Southern Baptists are very much so.
Mhm.
But I always heard the one that says wherever there are four Episcopalians, there's always a fifth.
Uh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I really like Chesterton's one of Chesterton's quotes. The three greatest allies in a Catholic's life are the pint, the pipe, and the cross.
Yep.
Yeah.
We got a lot of those.
Yeah. All right. So I think perhaps maybe our difference was mostly one of approach, and that's where we got our misunderstanding when we were talking about the consciousness thing. I was just talking about consciousness in itself. You were just talking about how any kind of atheist take on consciousness is inadequate to solve
Yep.
the problem of the one and the many. You know what?
Right.
Maybe I think we'll just agree that that was just a misunderstanding.
Okay.
Um, in ter- Yeah, although in terms of Kant, to his credit, he actually has quite a few good arguments for God's existence that I even utilize from time to time. I think
Well,
he
that's
makes it. I think
categorical imperative. He did that in the Critique of Practical Reason.
right. He also emphasizes the fact that any just universe really needs a God,
Right.
mostly because you can't have people like imagine somebody shoots up a school, murder, suicide. He doesn't pay any price. That's it. There's no morality present there.
Mm-hmm.
There is no practicality to justice. Rather, what happens is the categorical imperatives and categorical rules just turn into practicalities. Like, oh well, everyone is just really for themselves, and we're just arguing this really good contractual system for one another, and you can't really have any worthwhile categorical system of morality, whatever it is. Maybe it's Kant's, maybe it's a natural law theory,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm more partial to, but you really can't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a pretty solid practical argument for God's existence. That you have to at least presuppose that there is somebody who makes sure one's actions are going to suffer some kind of punishment.
Well, then that's just an argument for pragmatism, though, and then the atheist just basically says that um, difficulty is not an argument for truth. In other words, just because you want something that helps things to work, we're not looking to be pragmatic. We're looking to be true. So that's why I focus on a metaphysical argument from contingency. I'm going for the analytical argument. I'm not looking for any practical arguments.
I mean, they say that, but really, when it comes down to it, I would just bring up, look, you don't believe in the fact that the external world isn't real. You don't believe that the external world isn't real. You don't believe in solipsism. For practical reasons, you reject a lot of these outlandish and yet unprovable theories.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that that's good enough for it to be declared true. Why not God? Just inconsistent.
Well, practically, they can't live consistently with what they say is true, and that is true. But I mean, basically, all you're arguing is Romans chapter 2, and this is what I'm always saying is the reason we all value existence, and we all are determined to value existence, and you cannot be determined to value existence indeterminately.
I'm not. Could you simplify that? I'm not follow. I didn't follow that.
If are we determined to value existence as humans?
I apologize. Are we determined to value existence? I'd say we're disposed to.
Okay, and where did that come from? In other words, we're programmed for that.
Where did it come from? Well, I'd say it comes from the fact that, God mostly. I'd say.
Well, that's the point. I mean,
yeah.
you can't
Right.
have determination, any kind of determination toward a goal indeterminately. And that's what I think that's what I was arguing with David. I can't even remember what I was talking about. My mind is cloudy, but I've never had a serious challenge on it, but it doesn't matter.
All right. So maybe if I could just understand your argument, you're saying, look, we all freely we all freely love living. No, even those who are suicidal are only killing themselves mostly as a relief from things which make living hard, not from life itself.
Yes, but
And
also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
right, and thus and we can't just be determined to do so because, and that's because if that were the case, what would be the issue there?
No, we are determined to value existence. So if we say somebody wants to commit suicide, we all go and we say, don't do that. That's the wrong thing to do. In other words, we say if a person wants to kill, if they want to kill other people, they want to kill themselves, we say that they have a pathology. We say there's something wrong with them. And it's just innately, we know that. We know that it's wrong. And we say if someone is an axe murderer, we say that person needs to be locked up because they're going against the order that we all know. And so
you're saying the final cause of you're saying that the final cause of living you're saying that the final cause of life is to live.
Well, the final cause is going to be a telos. And so, in other words, the whole utility of teleology says that. Here's my argument. I say all the time: if you want to say that there's such a thing as value in life, or when I say value, that there's a telos to it. There's a goal. We live toward goals, and if we say that there's a goal, then you cannot have. And they say that everything is matter. This kind of goes back to what we were talking before. Everybody says, "Oh, everything is matter," and then my opponents will say that value evolved out of inanimate matter, and the problem with that is this is the principle of proportion causality or essay. A Gary Seckler essay. You can't have you got a state of complete unintentionality. Okay, there's no intentionality whatsoever. So unintentionality cannot intend intention into existence. If there is any intentionality, there must be something somewhere, somehow, that is eternally intentional.
All right. So what you're saying is, all right. What you're saying, as far as I understand it, is you cannot have values emerge from non-life because of the principle of proportion causality, and that's defended because things can't just come out of being from nothing.
Right.
Right. Every effect must have everything about it in one of its causes, and we know that one effect of life is the fact that we value life. We're geared towards valuing life. We all regard it as valuable. Even people who are wrong and are suicidal or want to murder, we'd say that that's disordered because they're not properly comprehending that.
Right.
And because we have this, we can infer that there's at least one final cause. And if there is a final cause or a teleology, we know that there is something in which we are directed towards, and that thing we call God.
Or, well, we know that we are directed toward goal, period. If there's any goal, like if you goal to say that right there, that's enough for me. Now, I do believe that if you extrapolate this out, I've never gotten that far really in arguing with people, but if in fact that we are programmed toward existence, and God himself, God doesn't have existence. God is existence. Again, he's identical with all his attributes, and he's not made up of parts, so he doesn't have existence in essence. He just is, okay? He is subsistent existence himself. So, the Bible says, it doesn't say that God has love. For us, love is an accidental property. It's
God is love.
We participate in it, but it's not essential to our nature. But God is love. So I said it doesn't have love. So he is the perfection of all that he is. So he also is existence. He is existence in and of itself. So if we value existence, then our duty is to worship him because he is ultimately existence himself.
Right. Although maybe this comes to a particular issue that presuppositionalists bring up all the time, with us who like arguing with classical apologetics, which would be something along these lines. Okay, you've gotten to the point where you've shown that we all have a goal. This goal is the prime mover, which we all call God. But how do we go from the Lyceum, Aristotle school, to the God of Christianity? How do we know that?
Revelation. Right. And also, here, we just had a debate. I think it's on that thread that we had there. My friend Josh and I debated a couple of atheists here in Kansas City, and somebody asked a question toward the end about God being three and also being one, three in person, one in essence. And I say that God must be multiple person in personhood, because if he didn't, like, for example, the God of Allah, he is a pure monad, and if God is all that he is, and he's a perfection of all that he is, and everything that is necessary for his being is who he is, then he would have to be relational. And a relationality requires a lover and a loved. So I don't know if you know, Muslims the God of Islam is very capricious, and love is not really something they really experience, and they never know what he's going to do. And it's because but the problem is, Allah in that paradigm is dependent upon his creation in order to be relational. Ours is not. Our God is three in one, three in person, one in essence, and he is able to be, in his subsistent existence, relational within that relationship without his creatures. He doesn't need it. And that's one of the reasons that we know that God must be one in essence and three, and it doesn't have to be three in person, but just by natural revelation, we can extrapolate that God must be more than one in a relational aspect. Otherwise, relationality would not be something he has, and therefore he could not impart it to us.
Oh, you're making, yeah, I mean, this is the argument St. Augustine made in his work on the Trinity, aptly named on the Trinity. And Lewis uses that, and yeah, that's actually a pretty good one. Although I would contend that, well, I agree the Islamic view is inconsistent. I think Muslims have a notion of love, at least, because one of God's names is the loving one.
Yes, but they can Scotch tape it on there, and it's kind of a herky view of love. Let me say that it doesn't flow well. I mean, there's a lot of contradictory things that talk about the love as he relates to his creation, and that's what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the fact that he is dependent upon his creation in order to have the attribute of reality, and therefore he cannot be ase.
Right. Would you say this is right, logically? Would you also say this is a problem for Aristotle as well, or any other non-Trinitarian classical theist?
Well, I do see problems with Aristotle.
Like God not knowing the future?
For who are you talking about? Aristotle?
Aristotle, yeah.
Well, Aristotle believed that that matter is eternal, and he didn't really give definition much to God, did he?
Not too much. Actually, at one point, he contemplated there being something along the lines of 60 or 90 some prime movers, but he said that these are but at the end he kind of said, oh no, these are actually like sub-prime movers for each sphere of reality, and he actually quoted the Homer's Iliad to say it's best that only one rule.
You've got to land ultimately on one. This is a problem with William Lane Craig. He lands on three. And he has three different consciousnesses within God. You've got to land on the one, otherwise you've got the many without the one, and you've got becoming without being. Whatever view you have. That's why Plato was strong, or Plotinus, was strong on that. His argument I thought Plotinus's argument for God was good in many ways.
Yeah.
Not that where he came, but I mean the fact that you said if you've got the one and the many, arguing basically for that.
I actually really like Duns Scotus's way of explaining the Trinity. So there's two kinds of ises we're acquainted with. There's the is of predication and the is of identity. So John is John is Matthew's father is an is of identity, because you're saying for any property John has and John's father have, they're identical towards one another. You could say the same thing about John that you could say about Matt's father. Then there's the is of predication, which is John is a dentist. So being a dentist is just one of the properties John has. Just because John is a dentist and Matthew is a dentist doesn't mean they're both the same dentist.
Right.
And this is kind of the difficulty Trinitarians have, is trying to explain how God can be, how the Father, Son, Holy Spirit can be identical to the substance of God, but not identical towards each other. So Scotus actually comes up with a third category, which I think is very interesting, which is something along the lines of maybe can be explained as the is of existence. So when it comes to predication, we have what's called we have an actual distinction. This is something that's separable by the mind. So, for example, I'll just use my book over here. So when it comes to this book, I could separate its various properties from one another just by thinking about how distinct they are. Even for something which is stronger, like let's say your animality or your rationality, I could contemplate those things separately from one another.
Right.
So they're actually divisible. And so they have actual potential between them. The second one is when it comes to identity, that's actually called a virtual distinction. This is one where the distinction is only in our mind. Our minds only happen to think John and Matt's father are two different people because, I know, maybe we're a bit confused. Like how people don't know Clark Kent and Superman are not the same person. Someone could think Clark Kent and someone could think Superman and not think that they're one another. But Scotus levies the what's called a kind of distinction where they're inseparable by the mind, but at the same time they're still distinct from one another in their existence. And an example that I think is quite adequate to show this is, have you ever seen one of those pictures where if you look at it one way, you see like a duck, and if you look at it another way, you see a rabbit? It's the same image, but they're two distinct. But within it, they're sorry, it's one picture, but there are two distinct images within it. So one could think of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit kind of like this. They share in the same existence as one another, but they are distinct from one another in a way that doesn't invite a kind of potentiality.
Well, obviously there can't be any potentiality.
Right.
Obviously, you're gonna have to go into mystery on that because there's no predication, there is no potentiality in their existence. And the example that's used, well, this is what James Dolezal, the guy that I like so much, he wrote a book called God Without Parts. That was his doctorate dissertation. And on the cover, he has the prism breaking up the lights and breaking up white light into the Roy G. Biv. And the analogy has been used that that's what God does, is he breaks himself up through accommodation so that we can grasp it in such a way that we can actually have some kind of analogy of being. And so the communication, although it is true, it is not comprehensive in the way that we understand it because we just don't have that capacity.
Right. So yeah, that's another approach of the Trinity called Mysterianism. The approach I'm taking is just creating a third kind of identity, which doesn't invite potentiality, but at the same time doesn't
gives you distinction.
Yeah, that doesn't invite potentiality, but at the same time doesn't collapse into modalism, which is a pretty hard tightrope to walk.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's very difficult, but it's like people spend their whole lives. Hey, listen, I gotta go. I gotta take my kid to my son to his friend's house tonight. I didn't realize I was gonna have to do that, but he called me and.
Oh, it's a good thing I asked for an earlier. It's a good thing I asked for an earlier hangout.
Yes, that's right, and it worked out well because I can go and take him. So anyway, I appreciate it. See ya.
Oh, by the way, are you familiar with the Protestant Catholic Orthodox discussion group?
No, on Facebook or what?
It is on Facebook, but there we kind of discuss theological differences, and Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestants get into a discussion with one another over our various differences. So
okay, well, send me a link and I might join it.
Cool. Okay. I'll send it to you on Facebook Messenger. Have a good one.
Yeah, all right. Thanks a lot, Seal. We'll appreciate it. And that is it. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you later.